Okay, so we're doing the sample practical test. So if we scroll down to the start, obviously we've got our virtual machines already running. And the first thing we have to do is create a home directory. So this is the area where every user's home folder will be stored. And we need to share it. Obviously, the home folder is something that the users connect to via the network. So unless it's shared, it's not going to be available. So we'll start with that. We'll go to our server. Login, password 1 as per usual. And the first thing we'll do is actually create a folder called homes or home on the C drive. So right click new folder. And secondly, we have to do is share it so it's available from network. So as we've told you for the from day 1 or 2, is that when we're sharing, we always share with full permissions to everyone. Because if we need to configure any controls, we'll do NTFS permissions rather than the shared permissions, because they'll contradict each other and you might get unexpected results if you don't share it with full control. So full control to everyone. Everyone is obviously everyone, and now it's available. So that's this first part done. The second part, we have to create an organizational unit with your surname. So that's going to our Active Directory, managing our Active Directory. So we can go to our tools, Active Directory users and computers, expand our domain, and inside of a domain create a new organizational unit. You can right click, new organizational unit, or you can actually just click on the new organizational unit icon up there. We always untick this protect from accidental deletion because we want to be able to delete it wherever we want to. And we said our surname, so I'm going to use my surname. And if we actually, so that's that part. And then it's saying to us that inside of that, create an office administration, finance, directors, organizational units. Okay, so just same procedure again, but we need to understand the hierarchy, so we need to make sure we create it inside of this one. So again, same structure, office administration, and to be honest, we don't care. I don't care if you don't name exactly what the test says, as long as it's actually obvious that you've created one for that particular OU. If you do this in the workplace, obviously you have to be consistent to your naming conventions that you use in your workplace. What was the other work groups? Finance. Anything else? Directors. Okay, so again, directors. Alright, so make sure they're all sort of off that your surname, and obviously sometimes you might have put it underneath something else, but it's easy enough to drag and drop into the right area if you do make a mistake. The next thing is a little bit strange, because what we've been doing so far is actually just joining computers to the domain. But what you can also do is actually create a computer account for each computer. So it's like a placeholder, a reserved computer account for those computers when they join to the domain. And if you look at this, we've got OA01, OA02, F01, D01. So obviously OA, Office Administration, F, Finance, D, Directors. Put them in the right area. So Office Administration, it's a new computer. So right click, new, computer, OA01, that's the naming convention. And that's all you have to do. You can even new another one, OA02. I think we went to finance, so we created a computer, F01. And finally go to directors, create a new computer called D01. So far it's been pretty straightforward, isn't it? So nothing super tricky at the moment. And then the next one is this your Windows 7 virtual machine. Okay, this Windows 7 virtual machine needs to be added to the domain. We change it to our surname 01 and we put it into the directors OU. So we'll do that. So here it is. I'll log on. So this is not in a domain right now, it's just a standalone workstation. It's a standalone workstation, and basically we have to do all the minor configurations to be able to join to the domain. So the critical things about this computer now is that it doesn't have an IP address, it doesn't have a DNS setting, and also the computer name is not the right one. So in order to join it to the domain, first of all we have to configure the IP addressing to a static IP addressing, because we're not up to the part of the DHCP server yet. So it's the same numbers we've been using for every class. So it shouldn't be a surprise, any of this. So the key things is that we use an IP address that's in a subnet with a correct subnet mask, and also critically we need to have the right DNS server, because like we said, if your DNS is not right, your Active Directory doesn't really work properly. The other thing we have to do is actually rename the computer name to our surname. So we have to change the name first before we can join it to the domain. So ZHAO, oops, 01 according to our test, and we'll just have to restart this and then join it to the domain. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, but one of the things you could test after you assign the IP address is that you can actually ping the server's fully qualified domain name. So that's the so that was server1.w2k12ad.local. That would prove that your IP address is correct and also your DNS settings are correct. So let me just show you this. So ping server1.w2k12ad.local, and you can see I can ping that. So that's showing me my IP addressing is fitted correctly. You notice I've resolved this from a fully qualified domain name to our IP address, so DNS is working correctly. So now I've confirmed that I can actually join my computer to the domain. Obviously later on we'll be doing our DHCP server, so we'll actually remove the static IP addressing and use the DHCP server to give it the right IP address. But for now we'll do it this way. Our domain is w2k12ad.local. And the user we use is administrator with password 1 for now, to actually get it to be a member of the domain. So it will have to go for a restart again. So here we go, that's correct. If you don't get that, you might have to work out if you've put your username and password correctly. So we'll switch over to the server again. And once we actually switch over to the server, you should see that there's that computer that we just joined to the domain, ZAO01, which is that Windows 7 computer that I just did. If you remember, the test says put that one into the directors OU. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. There it is, it's in general computers, organizational unit or container. But obviously if we want to put it into the directors OU, we just drag and drop. And the reasons why we put it in the right OU is because of the group policies. If you remember, the group policies only apply to those computers or users which are inside the container that you've applied the group policies to. In this case, now it's in the directors OU. Alright, what's next? Next is create the following user accounts. So these are 3 of them. And make sure they have their own home directory. So if you remember, there was a special trick with getting the home directory correct, and I'll show you that in a second. So let me just get the first one. Rachel Jones, who's a member of the office, who's part of the office administration department and also a server operator. So that's pretty important. So office administration, new user, Rachel Jones, and we have to have a naming convention that we spoke about in the assignment. And in our class, we've been using the first letter plus the surname of people as their username. Obviously, depending on your naming convention, this could be anything you like. The standard password we've been using in class is the password 1 with the capital P, so we'll stick with that. And for the test, I would recommend that you do stick with that. Don't change the password, because at the end of the day, when I go to marking it, if I can't log in, then it's extra hassle for me to go reset the password, isn't it? Keep it easy for me. Alright. Okay, my computer's thinking about it. Not really a good time to to actually think about it, so bear with me, guys. As you can see, my computer's really thinking about what's going on. So while it's not the best time for doing this. Okay, here we go. It's back. Okay. So remember how I said there was a special trick with the home directory? So just open up the properties of the user, go to the profiles tab. And if we want to connect the home drive automatically, we choose the drive letter. Usually we use H for home. And then we type in the UNC for the home directory. And that would be the server name. In this case, servers 1, share name, home. Then your specific home directory. And that special trick we're talking about is that we use the username, %username%. And what happens when I click OK is that it will substitute the %username% for the actual username itself. And using that %username% is good for templates, because in templates, obviously, it's going to be used to create many users, and their usernames are going to be different, so we'll just change to for whichever user. If we go to the home folder, you can see the R Jones folder gets created automatically. Okay. So let's go back and have a look at this other users. That one is Phoebe Reynolds, and it's in the finance department, and Joey Bruce, which is in the directors department. So new user. Oops. Same password. And don't forget we go in and set the home directory again. And again, okay, so the other one was Joey Bruce, I believe. So that was in directors. So Joey Bruce, J Bruce, all right. Okay, and we'll edit the home folder again. And to be honest, if we had to create more users than this, I might have used the template. Okay. Alright, so let's actually go back to the test paper and have a look at this. Okay, so if you look at the Rachel Jones, she's a server operator. So is Phoebe Reynolds. And Joey Bruce is a print operator administrator. Okay, so these are built-in groups. Server operators, print operators, and administrators are built-in groups, which means they're already there. We don't have to create any groups at this stage. So I'll go to Joey Bruce. I'll go to member of tab, and we can add print operators. You notice I typed the first few letters of the name, and I click check name. That will automatically find something that's closely resemble it. If there's more than one, then it'll give me a choice. That one is administrators. Okay, and I'll click OK. You can see it's a member of those groups. Now we'll go back to Phoebe Reynolds and Rachel Jones. We could do the same, but because they're both in the same group, the other way you could do this is actually go find the group itself. So if it's a server operators group, okay, let me just I can't seem to scroll. Alright, let's do it the other way. So Rachel Jones, properties, member of, add, server operators group, same as before. And Phoebe Reynolds, member of. And you can see that says pretty quick. You don't have to type the whole thing. Obviously you can browse and find the right groups as well. If you look at this, you also notice that there's an office administration group and a finance department group and a director department group. Okay, and obviously we've learned about the AGDLP. The AGDLP states that we need a global group, domain local group, to methodology. So let's actually show you how that's done. So if we go to Office Admin, so we create new we create a new group. And we're going to create a global group, and for this subject we've been using the GG underscore as to show that it's a global group. Office admin. And according to our AGDLP, I've got a global group going to be created in a sec. I also need a domain local group, so we'll change it to domain local group now, and we use the DL underscore to designate that's a domain local group. So if you remember the AGDLP, users are inside of members of global groups. Global groups are member of domain local groups. So we can do this by going to member of and adding Rachel to the global group, or going to doing the second way, which is how I prefer it because it's from the same area. I can do both. So from the global group, I can look at the members. There's no one right now, and I'll add. There it is, Rachel Jones. You saw how if there's multiple versions that start with R, they will show up both. So now Rachel's a member. And remember we said that global groups are member of domain local groups. I'll add, and we've got our AGDLP structure there. So you guys notice that the user is a member of the global group is a member of the domain local group, and we'll use the domain local group later to give permissions. We need to do the same thing with finance. So here we go again, global group first. So GG underscore finance. Domain local group second. So domain local group DL. So these names, as long as they're sensible, as long as you can recognize it, can be anything you like. But in class, I like to make sure that no one misunderstands what type of group it is by specifying the DL. And I always put the name pretty obvious so everyone understands what's the purpose of it. So again, we go to global group, we add Phoebe Reynolds, member of, add, oops, DL, in this case there's 2 of them, so we're on the finance, so we choose the finance, and we're good. And our directors, same thing, global group, GG directors, domain local group, DL direct, and again group membership, members, add Joey, member of, add DL directors. Okay, so I did that third one pretty quickly, but obviously it's the same procedure as every one of the other ones. If you hear that cough, excuse me. Alright, next thing we have to do is share some resources. We're really talking about the folders here. Okay, in the real test you might find that you'll be sharing printers as well. So don't forget we also shared printers early in our labs. So in this example, it looks like we're sharing folders only. But in the real test you might be printers as well. So first of all we have to create this directory structure. Okay, so it's obviously a little bit boring, but let's actually do it. Let's go to our Windows Explorer, go to our C drive. We have to create a folder called your surname. So just like the assignment, and we have to create a folder with our surname. I'll rename it to ZHAO, and we'll go inside of it, and we have to create a folder called data. And obviously it's pretty self-explanatory that you create those other things. So inside of there, inside of data, there's actually common, directors, finance, and like I said, it's a bit tedious. And inside of those, there's some subfolders as well. Inside of directors, there's actually reports. Inside of finance, there's budget and invoices. Obviously some example folders. Inside office administration there's a few, and employee data, employee forms, flyers and brochures, and finally logos. So again, it's a bit repetitive, but hopefully it's worthwhile afterwards. So if you look at this, now that we have to share the data folder, so again we're sharing at that top level. Okay, so right here we're going to properties, sharing. Again we share with full control to everyone, always. Okay, every time you share anything as far as folders and printers, when you're doing the sharing permissions on folders, it's full control everyone. Then we use the file system permissions, the NTFS permissions, to lock it down. Alright, so administrators should have full control to all folders. So if we actually go right to because it's all folders, we go to the highest level, don't we? If it's only a specific folder, we go to that level. But if it's to all folders, in this case we're obviously referring to all folders in this group, we go to the highest level, which is data. You can see that administrators has full control anyway, so that's already there. Okay, so the next thing is it says is that users in the directors department has modified to all folders. Okay, so modify. So we have to change that. So here's the data again. We go to properties. We go to security. You can see that users is there. Obviously, if users is there, that means everyone, doesn't it? Everyone with an account is a user. So we don't want people who are not specific people we want to give permissions to have anything. So first of all, we have to get rid of this users. The creator, owner, system, and administrator are fine because they suits the purpose. So right now we go to advanced. We disabled inheritance because the users' permissions are coming from the inherited permissions. So we disable inheritance, and we want to convert those inherited permissions to explicit permissions. What that means is that we make a copy of those permissions and put it at this object rather than use inherited permissions. And we'll click OK to that, and you can see now I can edit and I can remove users now. So it says that directors have modified to all folders. So again, we go to the highest level and we give directors. So the directors, if according to our AGDLP, is the domain local group directors access. Okay, and it's modified, so we check modify. What modify means is actually it means everything below that anyway. So you leave what's there, read, list, folder, read and execute, and also check modify. Okay, the next thing is Office Administration Department needs modified permission to all folders under the Office Administration. So Office Administration starts here, all the folders underneath there. So at this point, we'll go to Properties, we'll go to Security. You can see there's no users now, okay, because the inheritance started again from that data folder. So we edit, and this time we'll add the Office Administration, and this time again it's modify, okay, to that folder and below. And that's done. You can see that the directors also have modified because obviously we gave it at the data level and it's filtering, it's inheriting down. Okay, the other one is users in the finance department needs modified to finance. So we'll go to finance, do the same thing as what we did before. And it's finance this time, modify. So it's a little bit repetitive again. And finally, it says the Office Administration and Finance departments need write access to the common folders. Here's common. So security, edit, add. This time we're going to add Finance and Office Administration because the directors already have modify. These two have nothing. And now I've added both of them at the same time. They need write as well, so I need to go down and check write for both these ones. Easy enough to understand, everyone? Yep. Okay. All right. So basically, by removing that users group, we're ensuring that no one has access to anything they're not meant to have access to. Okay. So that was that last point here. Each work group should not be able to access in another work group's folder unless they have been given permissions, obviously. So so that's that done. Okay, the number 4 is the remote desktop. So configure remote desktop on the server. Use administrator to control the server. So remote desktop is very quick and easy. Just have to go start computer, right click, properties, remote settings, and allow connections to this computer. And we get to select users. but I can tell you now, the administrator is already given access by default. So we don't need to add any more users. If we add any more users in this list, that means they will also be able to remote desktop. But if you look at the requirements for that number 4, it's only administrators anyway. So we'll click OK, and obviously to test this, we switch over to the Windows 7 computer. We log in to the domain, W2K12AD administrator, to signify that this is a administrator, domain administrator, rather than the local administrator. So obviously administrator is a common username for every Windows system. By typing that part of it in, we're telling the computer that this administrator is from the Active Directory domain, not the local Windows 7 administrator. So when we're logging in now, this administrator is actually authenticating against our Active Directory. And now it's gone in, it's going to get a default theme. And it'll create the default desktop, the default theme, the local profile. Alright, so to test the remote desktop, all we have to do is click Start, Remote Desktop Connection, and we type in our URL, sorry, not URL, fully qualified domain name, or IP address. So we can type in server1.w2k12ad.local, and it should resolve if our DNS and IP addressing are all configured correctly. The first time we connect to a remote desktop, it actually takes a bit of time, okay, to initiate the connection. But subsequent connections are usually a lot faster. So at this point, don't get scared. Don't get scared it's not working just yet. Just be patient and wait a little bit, okay? Eventually you might, oh, now this is problematic. So yeah, this is where you have to say there's something wrong, okay? So if there's something wrong at this point, this is where we check our settings. Okay, remember, again, my computer's freezing a bit, so at this point in time, we just be patient. Usually it recovers. Don't freak out. There we go. So we type server1.w2k12ad.local. That is correct, but let's try an IP address as well instead, because at the point at this when I'm marking this test, I'm not worried about whether you're connecting via the IP address or via the name. The other thing we could do is just confirm again that we can ping server1.w2k12ad.local, which we can, so there's network connectivity. So let's give it another go, otherwise we'll have to check our settings. So while we're doing that, let me just check the settings anyway. Remote settings, allow remote computer. Okay. We'll uncheck that and we'll try it again. Alright, let's have a little bit more options. Alright, so it's not working right at this stage, and another thing that I like to do when I'm troubleshooting is that I like to make sure that anything I'm doing is not being affected by the firewall. Alright, as you see, the firewall is completely on. So I'm just going to turn off the firewall temporarily. and see if I can then connect, because by default, as you can see, that's a little bit better, isn't it? It's a little bit better. I'm prompted for the username password at least. Okay, so the firewall, if you don't know what a firewall is actually something that blocks connections from the network. And obviously when you get to the Cert 4, we'll have a second level of Windows where we talk about the firewall, and you'll be creating what's called exceptions in the firewall. But at this Cert 3 level, what we haven't done is actually talked about the firewall at all, because it's not at this stage. And as a result, today it was blocking me. In your worksheet, you might notice that we turned off the firewall immediately, so that doesn't become an issue. But you can see now that I've disabled the firewall, that remote desktop connections is working a little bit better. Okay, so with the remote desktop connections, it's pretty simple. Check a box to allow connections, and that's about it. But today, because I didn't disable the firewall, it prevented me. In real life, you would never disable the firewall completely like I did today. That's only for troubleshooting issues, troubleshooting internally. But in real life, if you're working on a production server, what you would do is actually just create an exception. So you can see that this is a remote desktop session now, and you can see I'm connecting to the server. So that's actually proved that my remote desktop is working now. So I'll close that, and I'll go back to my server. It's logged me out there too, and I'll log back in. Alright, so at this stage we're doing fault tolerance, which is adding a RAID 1 solution to your virtual machine, and we're doing a backup as well. Okay, so in order to have RAID, we know that we need extra hard drives, don't we? So we need, because we're using a virtual machine, we have to actually add those extra virtual hard drives. So what I'll do is I'll actually shut down my system, and I'll use VMware Workstation to actually add extra hard drives. And in our practice, we also know that the RAID took a bit of time. So basically what we need to do, because it's a RAID 1, it's mirroring, we need to add hard drives which are identical to this one hard drive, because RAID 1 needs 2 hard drives. So we'll create a new virtual disk, and we'll make it 60. We'll store as a single file, and we can rename it mirror if you wanted to, just so you know that what's the reason. And once we've done that, it also says something about the second part of it. You need to schedule a backup, and obviously in our worksheet we know that the backup required an extra hard drive to back up to. So bear with me for a second. So I'll add another hard drive, and I'll add a relatively small one this time, and we'll just add let's make it 10 gigs, and we'll call it backup. So a drive dedicated for backups. And now we've added those 2 extra hard drives, one for RAID, one for backups. We'll do it. So while my machine's starting up, so these are 2 things we have to do now. But if we look ahead a little bit, we still got a few other things. And if you want me to compare this to the real actual practical test next lesson, you'll see that it will be different, obviously. But a lot of the things you'll be asked to do will be the same. Okay, even if it's phrased a little bit differently, or the settings are a little bit different, they'll be very similar to what we're doing today. You'll notice that not everything we've done in the worksheets have been covered in this particular test. This is just an example of some of the things. So in the real test, there might be other examples. But don't forget, in your practical test, you'll be able to access all your worksheets as help. So now let's log into the server and get that RAID happening. Okay. So administrative tools, disk management. Sorry, computer management. And in that disk management, you can see that there's a drive here which is 60 gigs, which is for the mirroring. So I'm going to put that online and initialized. And then I'm going to add, right click, so don't forget I need to mirror both. I need a mirror to see where the operating system exists. I need to mirror the system reserved. This is where the boot partition is. So we go to the boot partition first of all. We add mirror. We'll select that disk and add the mirror. Okay. Okay, so now it's going to synchronize, and that might take a long time. So same here. I'm going to add mirror, and I'm going to turn that into mirror drive as well. During the test, when I'm marking, I'm not too worried about the fact that whether or not they're synced or not, because that actually could take quite a long time. So even though it's resyncing, I'm not worried if it actually ends up syncing or not. So with this other disk, I just have to put it online and initialize it to make it ready. So now I'm going to do the second part of that section, which is to do backups. So the backups, if you remember, is actually a role. So I'm going to install. I think it might be a feature. Windows Server Backup. Okay. So that was in one of the last worksheets, I believe. And I'll install. So until you install this feature, you don't have the backup software on your server. But once you install it, the backup or scheduling your backup is relatively straightforward. So unfortunately, at this stage, we just have to sit back and wait for the installation to be completed. As with everything in IT, there's a lot of waiting. But as you can see so far, we haven't really asked you to do many things that's really super difficult. We're just really getting you to confirm what you can do. And to be honest, if you were able to finish the assignment, a lot of this is already in there, isn't it? Okay, nothing super different from the assignment. If anything, yeah, a lot of it is missing from the assignment. Okay, so is it finished? Yes, probably finished. We'll close it. Installation succeeded. Yep, that's good. And now we'll go back here. We'll go to Tools. Windows Backup should appear now, right at the bottom here. Alright, so my computer's thinking about it. It's probably a little bit slow because of the fact it's resyncing as well. Yeah, the mirror. So it's always run slower when it's doing that. So don't be too worried at this stage. And to be honest, we're nearly there anyway. We've only got a few sections left in our sample practical test. Alright, so here we go. We'll go to local backup. Okay, so again, a little bit of waiting. So yeah. Alright, so just a little bit of waiting again. Here we go. So what we want to do is actually a scheduled backup. Okay, so it's a scheduled daily backup. So we'll go to backup schedule. and we'll go through this wizard. Next. Is it a full backup? No, it's not. It's going to be custom. We're going to choose exactly what's going to be backed up and what's not. And so we'll add items, and if I read from my test correctly, it's going to be a system state backup. Okay, so it's just a system state today. So if we actually check this box, it's just a system state. We can also back up specific files, whatnot included with this backup, but for today's activity, it's only just the system state. So I'll click OK. And next is a daily, monthly. In this case, it's a daily. And what time do we want to run? It doesn't matter because in the test, it didn't say what time. But to be honest, you really want to run your backups at a time where your users are not changing the files or the server. So 2 a.m. is a good time. So in this case, there's a couple of options to where to back up to. You can back up to a network, to a volume, or to a hard drive for backups, which is what we did today. So this is the 10 gig one. It's available here. This is VMware because we're using VMware. We add that in. We check that box next to that one to use that as the backup drive. We click next, and we'll just say delete anything that's on that drive. So be careful if you're doing this to a real hard drive with your data, obviously. But in this case, it's just it was a drive that we specifically added with nothing on there. So we'll click finish, and it's going to do a format of the drive, and it will now have a scheduled backup. So if we look at this, here's the schedule. The next one's going to be done on the 11th, which is tomorrow basically, because the time for today is passed by. But that's the backups. Okay, done. Next part is the security. This is the default domain security. So if we go to our group policies, so group policy management, so this is for the whole domain. So we're working with the default domain policy. Right click, edit, and it's a password policy. Security settings, oops, wrong one. Security policies, and it's a account policy. And the first one is a password history of 5, so that's a password policy. Here's a password history, properties, and we said 5. So what that means is it will remember 5 passwords you've used previously, and you can't use the same ones in that 5. It says the maximum age, 20 days. So maximum password age, double click, 20 days. Minimum password length, 8 characters, meaning obviously it has to be 8 characters or more in your password. And the other thing it's talking about is account lockout. So account lockout policy is here. Account lockout threshold is saying to set it to 2. But you'll realize when you click OK that you can't do this without defining the account lockout duration or the account lockout reset. So we'll leave it as default because it didn't say anything. So just bear with me for 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. Let's get back into it. So even though it doesn't say to define the lockout period or reset period, obviously you can't have a threshold without a action afterwards, which is lockout. So that's what we need to do for that part of the test. And we'll click OK, and obviously that's what I'll look at. So that's this part. The next part is the DHCP server. And to do this, we need to disable the VMware's default DHCP server. And you know how to do this from your 4IVM subject. Even so, I've shown you here how to disable it. So that's just VMware edit, virtual network editor. And because our server and client are working on the host only network, we just make sure that this local DHCP server is unchecked, which it is, which is great. Next thing is we need to again add a feature or a role, sorry, and it's the DHCP role. DHCP server, add features, next, install, and it shouldn't be too big, and it shouldn't take too long. So again, we need to wait for this to complete before we can configure some of the settings. So if you look at some of the settings we have to configure, we just have to configure an IP address range, a subnet mask, a DNS server, and a gateway. Nothing else. Obviously there's a whole heap of other things we can configure as well, but that's what we're asked to configure in this test. So now we can go to our tools and go to our DHCP server, which is now available. Again, my computer's lagging a bit. Here it is, IPv4, IP version 4 is the one we're working on. We right click, new scope. Okay, so here's a wizard that walks you through some of this configuration. Again, my computer's lagging quite a lot right now, so just be patient. We give it a name, so we might call it test scope if we have to, call it something. It even helps you, walk you through some of the settings. And if you look at your test, the starting IP address is 192.168.20. Go back again. As you can see, I'm having all sorts of problems right this second. So yeah, my computer's working quite hard. It's doing recording, it's syncing the RAID 1, and it's doing all sorts of things. 101 is the first one, and the last one is 192.168.20.200 is the last one. It already gives you the default subnet mask for that IP address, which is correct for what we need. No exclusions. 8 hours is fine. You want to configure the options, yes, and the first option is the gateway or router, and we said that that was 192.168.20.1. Make sure you click add. If you don't click add, it's not like you haven't done it. Next, the parent domain, it doesn't say, but that is our parent domain, so we can leave it. No Win server, and yes, I want to activate the scope. So we have to authorize a DHCP server in order for it to work. So we just right click on our DHCP server and authorize. And basically this that is to stop rogue DHCP servers giving out the wrong IP address to our computers. You can see when I press F5 it refreshes, and now it's got a little green tick next to it. And obviously the ultimate way of telling if a IP address if a DHCP server is working is to go to the client, and we'll set it back to obtaining its IP address automatically. And obviously if our DHCP server has been configured correctly, it should get its IP address automatically now. Alright, so if I do an IP config all, if I look at my local area connection, you can first thing you have to see is DHCP server enabled? Yes, that means I've changed it to automatically obtain. Is the IP address in our range? Yes, 101 is the first one, isn't it? Does it have the subnet mask? Yes. Does it have a gateway? Yes. Does it have the DNS server? Sorry, DNS server. Yes. And who's giving us our IP address? .2, which is the server. So that proves that it's actually done it. And the very last thing, so that's that part. The very last thing, or second last thing, is the CNAME, which is an alias in DNS. So DNS is already installed and configured on our server, but we need to add a CNAME. So we'll go to DNS Manager, we'll go to our forward lookup zone, we'll go to our domain. You can see there's actually server 1 and our client computer already there. A CNAME is alias, another name for. So we'll right click here, we'll go new alias CNAME. And the CNAME in this case is WW. We've seen that before, haven't we? Oh, sorry. That's for the assignment. In this case, it's DC. It's another name we're going to call server 1. It's going to be called DC. Okay? So that's the alias. Here's the full name. And who's the alias for? It's for the server 1, isn't it? So we need to make sure we actually tell it that this alias is actually for server 1. So basically this is what it's saying. DC is an alias for server 1. And obviously that's done. That's all it is. And to be honest, the easiest way you can test this is go to Windows 7 and see if you do an NS lookup, dc.w2k12ad.local. And you can see there's the answer. There's a DC. That's alias. That's the name. That's the IP address. And lucky last topic or thing to do is automatically map the H drive and R drive. The H drive is fine. That's already done for us when we created user and the home directories. The R drive is not going to be automated by default. We'll have to do this from a group policy. So it's data. It's the top level share, isn't it? And it's for everyone. So if we want to do it for everyone, we go to our Active Directory and we go to the very highest level, in this case ZAL. Alright, so we use our group policy management. We go to the highest level, which is ZAL, that everyone's underneath there, isn't it? We create a new GPO. We're going to call it test GPO. If you can't think of a name, just do that. And then we'll right click and edit this GPO. And we're going to go to Preferences, Windows Preferences, Drive Mappings. And we're going to create a new map drive. And we're going to change it to Create, because update updates the existing drive mapping. Create creates a new drive mapping. And we're going to type the UNC in. And that's server name, share name. And that's what's going to be mapped as. And it says R drive, so we're going to use the R drive. Okay? And that's all it takes. And assuming that's typed in correctly and everything's done correctly, what we can do is actually go to our Windows 7 computer and test this by logging out as the administrator and logging in as one of the users. So I'll switch user to J Bruce. I think that's how I spelled his name. Password 1. And what I should check afterwards is that I do get those H drive and R drive mapped correctly. Alright, so if it's mapped correctly, they should appear in my Windows Explorer. As you can see, there's my H drive, so the home folder. There's my R drive, which I can see all the different department folders. J Bruce is a director, so he should be able to browse all of those locations. I think he's a director. But as you can see, I can go in, it's still a bit laggy. And as you can see, it's mapped automatically. So basically, our group policy that I just created has worked. And that's pretty much the end of this sample practical test. Like I said, this is probably 60 to 70% the same as the real test. There will be differences in the way it might be structured, in the way the things they ask you to do. Remember, the one big thing is the printers. And we did not do any shared printers today. Definitely, I can tell you there will be shared printers. But we'll leave it there.